Now imagine being able to convince someone to pay you $200 million just for an airport that does not exist. This was the case of this guy up here. What he did to this guy, but we'll get to him later. He was able to sell this guy a fake airport and get away with it at first. Today we'll be unraveling how he was able to do it. So if you want to get the full detail, lock in with me, please stay focused, watch this to the very end, because today we're going to be exposing how he was able to sell a $200 million airport and get away with it. So stay with me, guys. So it all started in Nigeria in the mid 1990s when this guy named Emmanuel Nwude was the executive director of Union Bank of Nigeria. Most of you know Union Bank of Nigeria. He was a director that time. So he actually gave him a kind of a knowledge of the financial system and how everything works, which was kind of what gave him the platform on how to execute one of the biggest scams in history, guys. Lock in with me and you see how he did everything. So moving on, to kick off the plan, Nwude staged himself as the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is the biggest, was the biggest, and is still the biggest bank in Nigeria. He staged himself as the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to build trust between him and his victim. You see, this was a very smart move from him because anyone would believe someone with such high authority could sell him an airport. So Nwude and his team were able to convince people that this was an ongoing project, that it was going to be one of the biggest means of transportation in Africa as a whole. So they were able to convince anyone that was able to invest in it early will make serious profits in future. You see, this sense of urgency they built is actually a very smart marketing tactic. You see, if you create a sense of urgency to anyone you are planning to sell anything to, you're trying to convince, it creates a sense of, they feel like if I am the one that invests in this first, I will be the first to make profit. And that was how he was able to catch his victims. You see, this Nwude guy is a very smart guy. So moving on, you will never believe what he did. He was even able to fake CBN documents, false approvals. Him and his team were able to do all this just to get to the victim's head. And now this is where the victim comes in, as we earlier mentioned. So his victim was actually also another bank director, the bank director of a Brazilian bank whose name was Nelson Sakaguchi. So Nwude and his team were able to convince this guy, because after all, who would question the governor of the central bank of a country? So this scam was not a quick something. They took their time to actually convince their victims on everything. This was a long-term project, it was a long-term scam. You see, so over the years of 1995 to 1998, Nelson kept on investing and sending them money for an airport project that didn't even exist. He kept on funding the project, but the smart thing that Nwude did, that Emmanuel Nwude did, was that he didn't run away with the money suddenly. He kept on appearing, giving him updates of the project. He kept on giving him feedback of the fake project. Now listen, you see, Nwude was very smart to actually convince him that his money is going to a good cause. Meanwhile, it is actually nothing at the end. The airport does not actually exist. Now here's how things start to turn around. So although Nelson had his own financial knowledge himself, he didn't know that Nwude was smarter than him. So over time, Nwude and his team built a huge amount of trust between themselves and Nelson Sakaguchi and his team. You see, what they did was they kept on showing up, showing him evidence of the airport project ongoing, showing him different evidences of the investment he's planning to venture in. That is building the trust between both of them. And now you will never believe what happened next. And now this is how things started to turn sour. You see, the Brazilian bank that was managed by Nelson was actually being sold to a Spanish bank. And so the buyers of this bank actually decided to do a thorough investigation, a thorough screening of the bank they are planning to buy. Now pay attention, this is where they now caught Emmanuel. You see, they started to investigate and saw some shady movement of money into other accounts, which later linked to the transaction they had with Emmanuel. And so after massive investigation by the buyers of the bank, they finally discovered that there was no airport, no construction, nothing, that it was all a scam. And at this point, they have already spent up to $250 million on something that doesn't exist. Now, most of you might be wondering, did Emmanuel later get away with this? Well, I'll be getting to that. If you have made it this far into the video, I would like you to give it a like, subscribe for content like this, because I'll be posting even better content than this. So you guys, getting down to Emmanuel, when the news broke out of this, it actually shocked Nigeria and Brazil as a whole. Now, the newly formed Economic and Financial Crimes Commission that was newly established at that time in 2003 were on the case to actually nab Emmanuel and his accomplices. Now, this is how he got caught. So after much investigation, the EFCC were able to track down Mude and his accomplices. While they nabbed them, they were charged for 86 counts of fraud and money laundering. Well, in 2004, Mude and his accomplices pleaded guilty to the charges and were later charged with just 5 years in prison. And Mude was made to pay all the damages, but it was too late given the fact that the Brazilian bank had already fallen at that time. Now, I know most of you might be wondering what later happened to Emmanuel. Well, it turns out that eventually, after serving 5 years in prison and paying back all the damages, he was actually set free. But this scam, going down as one of the biggest in history, actually still affects us today. How is that? It has actually made banks to have a more secure system of dealing with customers and handling their business transactions. Now, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you will be the first to see when I drop another video like this. Stay awesome, guys.